Hello and welcome to Edinburgh. This is the capital of Scotland. I can hear the sounds of bagpipes in the distance, probably coming from the Royal Mile. Hopefully the microphone might be able to pick that up for you. But we're going to be here in this video talking about the history of flooding in the city of Edinburgh and some of the history of flooding around the city. But this is a city which is really built on fire and ice. When you think about Edinburgh, you don't necessarily think about its waterscape. You think about how it's been carved by a foundation of volcanics and the shape of it carved out by ice during the last ice age. So to borrow a phrase from Game of Thrones, this is a city of fire and ice. So ahead of us over there, you can see Edinburgh Castle on the top of that core of an extinct volcano, that big lump of solid rock which provided that castle with such good defence. And down here in the Princes Street Gardens, this is a gorge which was carved out by ice during the last ice age. Glaciers would have came out here and ripped that rock out around that solid volcanic rock core. That happened about 15 to 20,000 years ago. And this is also, you can hear the trains just in the distance going down this gorge and into Edinburgh Waverley Station, which is just over there. Now, obviously, because Edinburgh is known for its volcanics, it's known for that ice-carved landscapes. It's not known for its flooding, but like many major cities around the world, it does experience flooding. So I'm going to be heading out to the Stockbridge area, which is just to the west over here. We're going to be looking at the Water of Leith area. We're going to be looking at the flooding that happened there in 2012 and some of the things that have, some of the impacts of that and how the city has tried to manage that flooding going forward and some of the flood defences over there. And this is meant to be a really beautiful area, so we'll just have a nice walk around there as well and look at the river and some of the history of that area. So do come join me in the rest of this video as we explore the flood history of Edinburgh. So I've made it down to the Water of Leith walkway and I'm walking towards Dene Village. So this is the river here as it flows through Edinburgh. So it's draining an area of peatland hills to the northwest, coming from the Colzium Springs, which is the source. And this is a catchment area which is 117 kilometres squared, and the river itself is 31.7 kilometres long. And it's got upstream over this way at the Colzium Springs, and then downstream it will flow out at the Port of Leith into the Firth of Forth estuary. So we're heading down to Dene Village. This here is the Waters of Leith Weir, which is part of the management of this river, helps supply fresh water to the city of Edinburgh. So I'll just pause now as we take in that sound of the water going over the weir. So I just want you to appreciate the noise of that water, because that water is very powerful and was harnessed by Dene Village, which we're just about to see around this corner. In 1791, at its height, there were 76 mills which were harnessing the power of that water to do all sorts of different things. So it was producing paper, it was crushing grain, it was producing spices and snuff and textiles and all sorts of things. But due to different sort of management of the river, like the building of that weir just up there, and trying the city using this river to provide fresh water, that kind of industry declined. And by the 20th century, there were no working mills left in this area. But you've still got this beautiful village. As we'll see, we're just going to pass under a bridge over here. And as we go under that bridge, you'll see this village. And it's like finding a little quaint little alpine village right in the heart of Edinburgh city centre. Bear in mind, this is just a 10-minute walk from Princes Street Gardens. You find this little gem of a river down here. So we're just heading up. This is Dene Village, and you'll just see how incredibly beautiful this place is and how popular it is with people. taking photos, taking videos, taking selfies and things like that. So we'll just duck under this bridge. So there we go, that's Dene Village. So I've just stopped here, we're just downstream from Dene Village, and you can just see Dene Bridge on the left over there. And I've stopped here for no other reason than just, I find this place incredible. This is like an almost pristine natural river, or what looks like one, right in the middle of a major metropolitan capital city of a major Western nation, Scotland. And it's just, you've got this forest around it, this river which looks unmodified, it looks natural, although obviously the river is modified, there's weirs up and downstream from here. But just like 10-minute walk from the city centre and you're in this place. It's just beautiful. So this is a beautiful little spot where you can get right next to the river. So let's just take a few moments just to appreciate the kind of the sounds and the sights of this area. A bit of ASMR. I could just spend hours here pondering, watching the water flow. So we're a bit further on, and we see now the city is beginning to take over the landscape, and the river is beginning to become more managed and industrialised. So we're heading into the Stockbridge area, and this is where that kind of flood risk kind of begins, and where some of that flood management schemes have been happening. So we're just going to drop down across this road into the Stockbridge area. You see now this is much more like an urban river. The river's much more confined. It's got walls on both sides and it's constrained within those walls. Much more managed, less natural looking. So I've managed to find a spot a little bit further downstream where I can actually get close to the river again. You can see it's much more constrained. We've got kind of vegetation on either side, but rather than it being like a nice forested area, it's nettles, it's just weeds that are growing up here. And you've got a big wall on that side, we've got walls constrained on this side, and this footpath here, when you get high water levels, this footpath will flood and will be closed. So let's just explore this area a little further and let's see if we can see any of those flood defences. You can see these houses here, we're right on the edge of the river. Imagine living in those houses when the water level is getting high and you've got that water just under your window here. That must be a bit scary. I wonder if they've got any sort of special sealant on those windows as well. So we're a little bit further down the river now. So about a 15-minute walk from Dene Village where we were. We're in the Stockbridge area now. And this area flooded in 2012. It floods quite frequently, but the 2012 one is the one where I found flood reports and kind of useful information. So it flooded between July 4th and July 18th of 2012. It peaked at, this river behind us peaked at 44 cumecs. It's normally a flow of around 2 cumecs. And that estimated to be kind of a 1 in 7 year flood, something which has about a 15% chance of happening every year. So it's not an extreme flood by any means, it's quite small. Areas upstream like at Murrayfield where the stadium is in Edinburgh, that didn't flood during that event. So it's not a major flood, but it seems to have caused a lot of damage around here, and to have a big impact. Now here are where some of these flood defences are. So these flood defences were actually being built during 2012. And what happened here is the water went over the flood defences and got stuck behind these walls. So they had to bring pumps in following that event to actually be able to move the water out of these partially constructed walls. So when this river floods, these footpaths will flood here. These walls will stop the water going over. And just behind me here, you can see these are floodgates. So all along this area, there are floodgates like this. And when the river is estimated to reach a certain level, a certain kind of level of QMEC, a certain amount of flow, flood teams will come out and they will close these floodgates for the period of that flood and restrict access to this footpath. So that might be inconvenient to people. This is a very popular area for walking dogs and taking walks in this area, but it stops these properties flooding. So we're just a little bit further down from that floodgate, just up there. I just thought this is a nice spot where we could get down and see what the river is like here. And you can see how it is bounded right up against these properties. They've got some lovely balconies overlooking the river here, so it must be a nice spot here. But if you imagine the water level coming over this footpath and you're in your balcony there, it's going to feel very, very close to you. And I do wonder what level of flooding must be needed to kind of flood those balconies and what defences those houses have. So this is an area on the Water of Leith walkway, which is called Roshide Park. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but this seems to be like a community maintained footpath and kind of nice greenway in the middle of the city. And this really seems to me quite not very utilised. I've only encountered a couple of people walking in this area, places people walking their dogs and things. I've just dropped down on the footpath. The footpath is just up there on the bank to come down to the river. You can see it's very shallow here. It's probably less than a 30 centimetres deep across this area. It's got a nice steady flow to it. But you can see just right on the opposite side, you can see those relatively new flood walls, so about 15 years old flood walls on the other side, defending these houses from flooding. So across this area, about 100 properties were evacuated in that 2012 flooding. Some of those houses were, about 50 houses were damaged. Some of those were from surface water flooding rather than actually flooding from the river. But many of those houses were flooded because of water from this river. And you can see those flood defences kind of defending that river, defending those properties on the other side of the bank. This side of the bank is like a woodland area with a footpath through, allowing you access to the river down here as well. And it seems to be something which is kind of utilised by local people who live here. It doesn't seem to be something that tourists have found or use as well. So it's a really nice, quiet spot right in the middle of the city. So I've just come a little bit away from Rothschild Path, across the river over a little bridge. I'm just going to walk down this street with beautiful little houses. I mean, this could be a village in the middle of the countryside somewhere. And we're going to look, because there's some interesting flood defences on the edge of this bridge. So we'll just walk down here and I'll show you these defences. So as we're approaching this bridge, you can just see that flood wall like we saw in the last video, which is protecting all these houses here. But obviously to get the bridge through here, to get the footpath, they've had to put a hole in this bridge. And what seems to have happened here, what appears to me, is you can see these kind of door structures here, and you can see there's bolts here in the handrails of the bridge. And it looks like you can take that bit of handrail out and close these glass doors and make a physical barrier to stop that flood water coming through. And we just see when we get to the other side of the bridge, there's the same thing, but I assume this is to stop people walking over the bridge when that river level is high. So a little bit further down, we've got this really nice looking bridge here crossing the river, and you can just see you've got these houses here. They've got their flood walls, but obviously to give them still some amenity so they can still interact with the river, they've got these glass windows, which will be waterproof glass windows at the top of those walls, just so they still got a view of the river. And as we look to the left, We're heading closer and closer into Stockbridge. You can see it becomes much more urbanised here. So where these walls look new and nice and well kept, here we've got walls which look a bit more industrial. They look older. They're covered in graffiti. They look like they've been here a bit longer. So we're just going to head down here and see what we can see. So I've double backed on my route a little bit, come back here, past further upstream from Rashid Path. We're coming back into the main part of Stockbridge now, and we're going to go walk up these streets. So these are the area which was actually badly flooded in 2012, which was really affected by the flooding. And this is kind of the area where these houses were. 100 properties were evacuated, 50 houses were affected by the flooding. And we're going to walk up to the Stockbridge Tap, which is a pub which temporarily closed during this flooding, and that's where we're going to end our tour today. So this here is the Stockbridge Tap, and this is one of the properties which was flooded. I can find information that this place was flooded, closed due to the flooding in 2012. So you kind of see the river was way back over there. And just to kind of summarise what we've seen, like the flooding in Edinburgh is very different to kind of some of the other videos I've made. It's not like the raging torrents in Florence where you'll see those flood markers high up on the walls or anything like that, or the extensive floods that we see in Prague, where you've got the temporary flood barriers all around the edge of the river. Here it's more subtle. That river is a lot smaller. Those flood defences are kind of just temporary gates on the walls, but even though Edinburgh doesn't have that raging powerful river that's needed to manage, it still has its hazards and its risks from flooding, as we've seen as we've walked down the Water of Leith. So I hope you've enjoyed this flood tour of Edinburgh. If you have enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe and all the other things we say for social media, and join me for future flood tours.